Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butz, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome to Spill and Dish, a podcast from the Specialty Food Association. Founded in 1952, SFA is the leading trade association and source of information about the $175 billion specialty food industry. We champion the food producers, retailers, and other buyers who make up the specialty food world. Each episode, we want to share the stories behind the products made and sold by our members who are helping shape the future of food. You can listen and discover the inspiration, recipe, craft, culture, ingredients, and production methods that help answer the question, what makes specialty food special? I'm today's host, Julie Gallagher, Content Director at SFA. We're excited to bring you today's episode and so happy to be working with Heritage Radio Network, a nonprofit podcast network covering the world of food, drink, and agriculture, and expanding the way eaters think about food. Today's guest is David Kemp, CEO of Village Gourmet, a producer of fine meats and snacks that markets products under the brands Three Little Pigs, Fabrique de Liche, Longini, Esposito's, and Uncle Charlie's. David is also the winner of SFA's 2023 Leadership Award for Vision. Welcome, David. You have such a fascinating background, and I can't wait to hear more about it. And I understand that you have a military background. Can you start off by telling me a bit about that?
Sure. Thanks, Julie, for having me today. I grew up in the New York area, and my dad was in business, and I always kind of thought I'd go into business. So I didn't have a plan to join the military. And then September 11th happened, and I decided that I wanted to play an active role in the defense of our country. That led me to decide to join the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps officer program while at college, and then as soon as I graduated, I commissioned as an officer in the Marine Corps.
Wow, so you were a student at Yale during 9/11?
I was actually before.
Okay.
I was a student. I was in high school during 9/11.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wow, okay. And then so you served 2 terms in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I did 2 deployments to Afghanistan. So They were, it was 2010 and 2012, so a while ago now, and it was what I signed up to do, and it was a great but tough experience. But happy that I did it, because that's again kind of why I wanted to join.
Okay, and then so you came back to the States, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I came back to the States, and I decided that I wanted to go into business, which is probably before September 11th what I had always kind of planned on doing. And I applied for business school while I was in the Marines, and did my business school interviews on a satellite phone in Afghanistan. So I think, that definitely made it memorable, probably helped those interviews a little bit, because if I didn't like a question, I could just say, oh, I can't hear you. But yeah, so I applied to business school and I went and got my MBA at Harvard, and I was, a little bit unsure of what I wanted to do. And I had a summer internship in consulting, and, I liked it enough, but it just wasn't something that I was passionate about. And after the Marines, I wanted to do something that I was still passionate about, because in the Marine Corps, one thing, whether it's a good or bad day, you're passionate about it, and it's kind of a motivating thing to be part of and have a purpose. And so it's just, consulting for me wasn't that thing, and it can be for others, but just wasn't my path. And so I ended up deciding I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial and look for a business to particularly buy and run. And so I ended up, after business school, getting connected to Alon, who was the founder, one of the two founders of Three Little Pigs, and had been, running it for a while, as the other founder had passed away in the 90s. And he didn't really have an exit plan. His daughter was 14. He was had a late start, and the rest of his family was in France. And so he needed a way to make sure that the business got passed on for the future.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's really interesting. So had you set out looking for a food business in particular, or how did you?
No, I didn't. I probably looked at I did look at a ton of different businesses, like ranging from things you would never think of, like window film, which is not something I thought of before and not something I really think about after, or, other manufacturing industries or service industries, just across the whole wide variety. But I definitely felt a connection to Three Little Pigs and Alon. And I had, my family has a place in France, and I'm not French, but I grew up going to France and appreciating French culture and food. And so I think there was just, I was excited about it, and I love charcuterie, and so it was just a great fit for me.
Okay. And then, so you joined the business, and then you became partner?
Yeah, so Alon stayed on for a couple of years after that, and it was I still have a great relationship with Alon. I mean, he was instrumental in teaching me about the industry and about, everything, because I didn't have, in a way, it was my first job, right? I mean, the Marine Corps isn't really a job, so I had a summer internship consulting, but I came into Three Little Pigs as I was, 30 years old, and had certainly never run a business and never really been in a business. Mm-hmm. But, Alon stayed on for really 3 years there and helped mentor and guide me along with, the rest of the team, some of whom are still part of the company now, like Maha and Leaf. And, I really owe a lot of it to them, because I didn't come in with the experience, and if I didn't have a good team there, I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done.
Were there skills that you sort of drew upon from your military service in the job? They are so different, but I'm sure, you were able to tap into things that you had learned.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some stuff which thankfully I've never used again out of the military. But I think the general leadership principles that you learn in the military, I mean, that's, as a 23-year-old, I had a platoon of 45 Marines that I was leading in combat, right? And that's the kind of experience that most people, very, very few people get at that age. And so I think the leadership skills and the decision-making skills, those transfer across any kind of, whether it's the Marines or business or anything. And so I think that certainly hopefully brought with me to the company.
Okay. And then I know that you grew the portfolio of products. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think, over the years with Three Little Pigs, we've definitely expanded our product line, and, we launched an organic line of pate slices, and that's nationwide in Whole Foods now, among other places. We've launched egg bites, which have done tremendously well for us. And then we've also really broadened we've done ham for many, many years, but it was always kind of behind the counter ham or food service ham. And we launched a sliced ham, and that has done really well for us the last couple of years, and we're expanding that line this year.
Okay. And then you started acquiring businesses as well.
Yeah. So I think, I didn't go into it thinking, I wanted to acquire other businesses along the way, because that just wasn't my goal at the time. But a couple of years in, Rich Longini, who was, third generation running Longini, he had the same kind of dynamic where he needed someone to take over the business because his family just didn't want to run a sausage company. And so he had heard what I had done, it's in New Haven, so not that far from New York, what I had done with Alon, and reached out, and I realized that it could be a good way to continue expanding the business, because there's a similar, high quality product, family brand that, that Rich had done a great job managing, but needed someone to take it for the future.
Mm-hmm. So are these families still involved with the business?
At this point, Rich Longini consults, and, I was talking to him earlier this week, and I always catch up with him. Alon stops by the office every once in a while. He's not part of the business anymore, but he's always part of the business because he was the founder of it, and we love it when he comes by the office. And it's just a great guy to have around and be part of. And it's still, it's always his company in a way, right? Because his DNA is part of the company.
Mm-hmm. And then tell me about Village Gourmet. That launched in 2020? Yeah,
so I think over the years, we added Longini into the portfolio about 5 years ago. And then a couple of years ago, Sebastian at Fabrique de Lys, who's the president of Fabrique de Lys, that was the next kind of acquisition that we did or brought into the family. And we realized that kind of needed a name to separate, the overall group from each individual brand because it was getting confusing. And it wasn't like Three Little Pigs running Fabrique de Lys by any means. And so we had to change, launch the name Village Gourmet to give kind of an overall umbrella to the brands that we have under us.
And did that happen before or after the pandemic?
It happened like a month before the pandemic. So right then. We Fabrique de Lys became part of Village Gourmet January 31st. And I guess technically the pandemic was going already then, but, really didn't rev up till March with all the shutdowns.
And then did you have to sort of pivot your business during the pandemic? I mean, how are your consumers changing their eating habits, if at all?
Yeah, no, it's quite dramatic shifts. I mean, as you can imagine. I mean, we had, in mid-March, everything sold because people were just grabbing anything they could at the grocery store. But then the retail part of our charcuterie business actually had a very tough couple months because so much of charcuterie is about bringing people together and parties and sharing, and that wasn't really happening in those months of COVID. But luckily our business is fairly diversified because the sausage part of the business, that is more of a cook at home thing that you're going to do even if it's just a couple people eating at home. And so that part did really well and balanced it out. And we also have a bunch of different channels too. So, our food service, restaurants, that obviously did very poorly during that time period. But, overall retail did well, but we also have a lot of e-commerce partners that, as you can imagine, had a really strong year that year, which balanced us out. So if you look at how we were growing in January of that year before the pandemic, we had been up about 25% over the prior year. And then if you look at the January of the next year, we were also up 25%, but totally different parts of our business were growing. And so it ended up by luck, not by design, kind of being a balanced portfolio for us, but didn't predict it, and that's for sure. So kind of lucked out there.
Are things getting back to normal now?
I hate to say back to normal because I don't want to jinx us, but two, it's never going to be exactly the same as it was before, I think. But in terms of buying patterns, I mean, I think we've seen more or less settling back to normal. We do more e-commerce than we did 4 years ago, but I think that was growing anyways. But maybe it's grown a little bit more than otherwise would have. But more or less, we're seeing patterns go back to how they were before COVID, and our restaurants and food service partners are doing really well, as well as our retailers. But they're not, there's not the tailwind behind retail anymore.
How is inflation impacting your business and your consumers' spending habits? I guess, are you passing along increases? How's that working?
Yeah, no, it's been a tough year with that for sure. And I think if I look at the first 6 years I've been running the business, I mean, we would very, very occasionally do a price increase. It was not a yearly thing. It was when I had to, but things were pretty steady. And that mindset had to change for us because it was just, we were probably a little bit slow to start with price increases because we hadn't been used to doing them all the time, and we had to catch up, basically. But a lot of our inputs have gone up dramatically. I mean, we buy, eggs, we buy pork, we buy chicken. I mean, there were at times this summer, I mean, almost everything was double or triple what it had been 4 years ago. And thankfully things besides eggs, have stabilized a bit, and have come down a bit, at least in some of the commodities. But it's still been, quite a difference from how we ran the business 4 or 5 years ago.
Right. Are the specialty consumers that you're targeting a little bit less price sensitive, would you say?
That's an interesting question. And I think it's a little bit too early to know still. And that we've done price increases, and so far it hasn't really affected our sales. And I think that, people are probably a little bit less price sensitive on the specialty side, but we're not really even in a recession yet, at least according to economists. And so, that may change over time. One thing though, that if you look back, and I wasn't running the business then, but if you look back to the 2008, 2009 recession, and I look at our numbers from then, we actually lost maybe a couple points of growth compared to before. And that's because a lot of with the charcuterie items, maybe they're not eating going out to fancy restaurants, so they'll buy it in the store. And even though it's a little expensive, compared to a night out in a restaurant, it's not as expensive. And so, we see balance that way. And again, I think, an actual recession would knock a couple points of growth, because I think consumers are becoming more price sensitive now than they were a year ago. And I think maybe starting to see the effects of that in terms of trading down a bit. But it hasn't been a huge effect yet.
Okay. How was the winter holiday season for your product?
Yeah, we had a really good fourth quarter, which was great to see. I think, like many people, we were worried about how sales were going to go and whether we would see kind of cutbacks compared to prior years. But we ended up the year up 23%. So we had another very strong year, and fourth quarter was pretty much just as strong as the other quarters. But I certainly have seen at some of our retailers where maybe have more price-sensitive consumers that may be trading down a little bit there.
Is there education that goes into marketing your products?
Well, in particular, the pate part of our business, which is actually Fabrique de Lys and Three Little Pigs, started as really pate companies, and we do all sorts of charcuterie now, but we're the leaders in pate in the U.S., and that is something that most Americans haven't tried even now. And so we're constantly trying to figure out ways to reach them. To reach consumers who either know a little bit about it, have tried it once or twice, or maybe have never tried it but are a little bit scared but would be willing to try it. And so one of the our initiatives for this year is, we're not that big a company, so we can't reach every possible consumer ourselves. It's just we don't have the marketing budget of Pepsi or Coca-Cola or anything like that. So we're focused on kind of training the trainer and working with our retail partners to help make sure they, the person behind the cheese counter, if they're selling the pate, they have the knowledge about pate to pass it on to the consumers who visit them. And so we want to take those, train them so then they can bring it to the thousands and thousands of people that they interact with every day. Mm-hmm. And so that's really our initiative this year.
Do you do in-store sampling, or do you do sampling with those employees?
We do in-store sampling. Prior to the pandemic, we did a fair amount of in-store sampling. We haven't ramped it up as much as before. So we're not anywhere near the levels we were before. Some of our retail partners are just slowly bringing it back. And I think when we look forward, towards the next years, I think it will become more and more, again, part of our marketing mix. But I think we don't want to be limited to just reaching people through those demos, because demos are a really expensive way to reach people. Yeah. And, if it's in a retailer where it's without that much high traffic, and it may not have a positive return to have a demo there. But if we can train that person who's in the deli department or the cheese shop there, then they can reach people every single day, even when there's not a demo. So that's, demos are definitely part of our marketing mix, but we want to, plus it up with other ways of reaching people.
Okay. And what would you say is next for Village Gourmet?
So I think we're constantly trying to innovate within our product categories while staying true to the authenticity and heritage of the brands, and obviously and the quality too. And so, this year, we mentioned a little bit, we're launching the flavored ham. So we launched our sliced French ham a couple years ago. It's doing really well. And we're launching a rosemary ham, a Mike's Hot Honey ham, which is in collaboration with them, which I think will be really fun. Mm-hmm. You should try it sometime. And then also a smoked ham and a truffle ham. So those are all launching this year right now. And then we're also launching a line of refrigerated entrees. And so, different recipes that are true to our French heritage, but bringing them in ways that are accessible to the modern consumer, that they can eat on a night when they don't want to go to a restaurant or don't want to prepare a meal or don't want to order delivery, which delivery gets really, really expensive. And so I think this is a way we can reach them with a really high quality product that is different from whatever else is on the market right now.
Okay. Mike's Hot Honey is an SFA member company, and they actually won a pitch competition that we had a few years ago. Yeah. So I'm just curious, how did you get hooked up with them for the ham product?
So the hot honey ham was actually my wife's idea. I was just talking with her, telling her we were going to be, launching some new hams, and we're brainstorming ideas. And she loves Mike's Hot Honey and thought it would be a really cool, ham flavor. And I was like, all right, why not? And we tried it and we loved it. And so our marketing team reached out to them, and they've been super easy to work with and a great partner. And just, it's a great product. So adding it to what is already hopefully really good ham, adding Mike's Hot Honey makes it even better.
Wow. And then so that's like a co-branded product?
It's a co-branded product.
Oh, are there any other co-branded products on the horizon?
Yeah, we're actually launching a Jasper Hill co-branded egg bite. So we're using their Whitney cheese, which is an award-winning cheese, with our egg bites, and partnered again. It's co-branded, and we're launching it right now. So we're really excited about that. And then with Fabrique de Lys, we're launching a co-branded flavored butter, or compound butter, with Isigny Saint Mère. So Isigny Saint Mère is a French butter producer, hundreds of years of heritage in Normandy, amazing butter. And we're taking that butter and making a truffle butter, making a garlic and herb butter, a lemon pepper butter. And so I think, and that we're also launching this year. So we got a lot of stuff we're launching this year, and a lot of it is actually co-branded, which is something that we hadn't really done in the past, but I think it's an exciting way to, want to work with other companies and kind of bring both brands to each other. And, we can, people recognize the Isigny Saint Mère butter, but then they also know that Fabrique de Lys is an American company, and how we can together make a product that each on its own wouldn't be able to do.
Do those co-branded products usually open new distribution channels for you as well?
We're actually launching all those right now, so it's still early. But I think one of the cool things is that someone who is buying Jasper Hill cheese, may not have considered our egg bite before, and I mean a buyer as in a grocery store buyer. And now it's like, oh wow, we sell a lot of Jasper Hill cheese, and I love it. Let's also bring the egg bite in, and vice versa. And same thing with Isigny Saint Mère butter, that's for sure, because they sell to many, many retailers their butter that we're not a butter company. And so by combining forces, we're able to reach all their consumers and customers and all of our consumer and customers.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, but before we go, I'd like you to take part in our Take 5 segment, where we ask our guests 5 questions. But first, let's take a short break.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Okay, here are your 5 questions for our final segment, Take 5. What's your favorite thing about the specialty food industry?
Coming in without having any food experience at all, it's just people have been incredibly welcoming and helpful, even just going out of their way to help with nothing in it for them at all. So the people in this industry have been fantastic to work with, and really enjoy working with them.
Okay, and what do you like most about being a Specialty Food Association member?
Well, I think the food shows the fancy food shows are just a classic part of the industry, and being part of those has always been, key moments in our calendar every year to meet with our current customers, but also hopefully get new customers, and also just catch up with other people in the industry.
And if you weren't running a business, what would you be doing?
I don't know. I think I would be running a business in a different industry, I guess. Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not going to go back in the Marines at this point. So, I've thought about, I'm happy in specialty food, so I'd like to stay here. But if I did another industry, I have a lot of friends who are in the clothing industry, and maybe do something in that.
Okay. And what's the one piece of advice you'd give a new food business?
Just ask other people in the industry for help, and don't be shy about it. And just reach out. It can be a cold email, call, or connection. And 99% of the time, they're going to help. And so don't be shy about that. And there's a ton of resources out there, both through the SFA on the website, but just people in the industry that are here and willing to help you. And so take advantage of it, because someday hopefully you can pay it back too.
Great. And how do you define specialty food?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if you go, with my friends and my family, no one ever says specialty food. I've never, my wife's never saying, "Oh, I want to go buy some specialty food." Like, that's just not really in the vernacular anymore. And so it's not a common word, but to me, what specialty food means is food where the goal is quality, right? And that's what we're aiming for, to make the best quality product that we can. And I think that is what differs us from other food companies or industries where it might be more price-based or mass market or things like that. And so really being focused on quality, to me, that's what defines specialty.
Okay. A big thanks to David Kemp for joining us today. You can find out more about this show at specialtyfood.com and heritageradionetwork.org. And remember to follow wherever you get your podcasts. Come back often to get to know the people who are shaping the future of food. Special thanks to David and to Heritage Radio Network, the world's pioneer food radio station. This is Spill and Dish, a Specialty Food Association podcast.
Spill and Dish, a Specialty Food Association podcast, is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.